Paul, for the introduction, and thank you all for taking the time to join us for this session 2. I'm going to look at sharing my screen. So here is the roadmap to net zero, and as your session 2, we had a session last week, same time, same place. So what is the program made of? We looked at net zero last week, and what does that mean? The why and who cares, and the what and where the opportunities are. This week, we're going to focus on the how, with mainly a focus on skills, and we'll use the same tools, the 5W and 2Hs, the what, the why, the who, the when, etc. And in part 4, we look at resources with a focus on policy and why you need a policy and how to get you started in setting up a policy. So if I look at last week and make a summary of it, we talked about what net zero was, which isn't about zero emission. You can use emission trading schemes, but really what we needed to take out of it is that net zero has got 3 scopes. Scope 1 is a given, that's your emissions, and really you tend to try to minimize them, because if you minimize emission, you minimize consumption and waste, and if you minimize those, you minimize your cost. So net zero or not, that's really scope 1, something you tend to look at. Scope 2 is the emission from your energy provider, and here that's driven by energy cost. But again, that's something we can have a direct action very quickly. The most complicated and convoluted piece is scope 3, which is looking at downstreams and upstreams. And that could be your emissions, like upstream would be things like your employee commuting. It could be the goods you purchase or the raw material you're going to transform. It could be waste during that process, etc. And then you go your downstream, and a lot of your downstream is about delivery, transportation, packaging, that sort of things. And what you need to remember, obviously, is that your downstream is your customer upstreams, and that's why they've got a very keen interest in scope 3. Because for them to be net zero, for the customer to be net zero driven by the consumer, then they're going to look at their upstream, which is going to be your downstreams. And we looked at the why, and the why is because all the stakeholder cares, and the key stakeholders being, your community, being your customer, which is where you start, and then it could be your employee, your competitor, yourself, and then the world cares, being Scotland, the UK, Europe, the world at large. But really, the information we got out of it is a challenge and an opportunity. And what is the challenge? The challenge is net zero is coming forward. Net zero is something a lot of people have heard of, and 80% have heard about scope 1, 2, and 3. But there is an opportunity, and our opportunity is only 25% of the people have heard about it, or 25% of the businesses more than heard about it. 25% of the businesses are actually doing something about it. So the challenge is it needs to be tackled. It's at the forefront, and this is why the opportunity is that there are few people doing things about it. And there is 2 types of opportunity: is risk mitigation and tapping into the opportunity that net zero is. And the risk mitigation, we talked about legislation, about the regulatory requirements, about reporting, about access to finances, about your supply chain. So that's all the risk, and obviously your reputation. And then the opportunity it provides, we talked about that when we looked at the what and the various chapters, but there is opportunity, as mentioned, in cost savings. There is opportunity and your relationship with your customer, which they're going to want to influence and they're going to want to be part of. And there is no particular differentiation. That's why the graph saying, as I say, 80% heard about it, but only 25% are doing something about it. So we looked at the why, and we looked at the what across the 8 chapters that have been defined by the Scottish government. And we looked at, when we looked at those, we looked at what were the opportunities that each chapter offered. And that's the target, the strategy that each chapter is looking at. So today we're going to look at part 3 and 4. And part 3 is on the how, and we look at the what, the why, the who, the when, the how, the where, and how much, and basically the 5 W and 2 H's. And then we'll take a quick break. And then in part 4, we look at the resources and I'll share some of the resources that has been used to develop those presentations. But really, we will focus on the policy and why you need one and how to start putting a policy together. So what became clear last week was these will need innovations. And to deliver innovations, you need to marry 4 key pillars. You need to marry social trends, your market trends, your technology trend, and last but not least, your company strategy. And what you need to do is you need to start at the top, the desirability, the customer, the consumer. That's where you start, and that's the why now we talked about last week. And then you need feasibility. And for the feasibility, then you need to look at the trend, what is feasible technically, and that was the what now, and that marry the company and the technology trends. And what we're going to look at today is more on the viability side, is on the how and on the skills. So you start with your consumer and your customer. So your consumer on the social trend, your customer and market trends. Your supplier is likely to have the technology trends, being supplying equipment or supplying raw material. And last but not least, you need your business. But to deliver the innovation, the question is, does your business have the skills to do that? That's what we're going to try to answer. So how now? Skills. That's one of the major cogs in delivery of those opportunities. And we're going to look at it for the what, the why, the who, the when, and the how, the where, and how much. And how much we look at funding opportunities, we look at academia, how we bring them in, and the skills required, and where they are required. So if we start with the what, the skills action plan, that's really what has been delivered by Skill Development Scotland. We refer to as CSAP, Climate Emergency Skill Action Plan. And as mentioned last week, it's got a plan to 2025 because the plan, the emergency plan is 2032 target for the Scottish Government, with being net zero by 2045 in Scotland and 2050 in the UK. So if you look at the basis of that plan is a route to 2045, which we plan to be net zero, and 90% reduction by 2040 and 75% reduction by 2030 to get there by 2045. And when you look at it, I've highlighted where we've been looking at one of the areas, and it could be travel, being active travel, being buses, being plane, being cars, being rail. So all the travel, it could be waste, and it could be plastic waste, it could be recycling, it could be food waste, it will be energy and energy transitions from gas to electricity, from offshore to renewable. And also you've got low carbon manufacturing, you've got carbon capture. Energy-wise, you've got bioenergy. And in terms of land, you've got land use, you've got woodlands, you've got peatlands. So what am I saying is there is no stone left unturned. They are looking at every opportunity to decrease emissions. And that's where you want to look at, do you have an opportunity in those areas. That's what we talked about in the what last week. So that was the basis of CSAP. And what did CSAP look at? They look at industries, and they identified, or sectors, should I say, and they identified 5 sectors. And the one that's of key interest to us is the manufacturing one, with a focus on engineering. But they also look at energy transition, construction, transport, agriculture, land use. So you can see how those come back again. It's the same theme, it's the same sectors that were presented in a plan, the Scottish plan. And they identify 6 priorities. And our priorities are around skills, and it's about green skills, it's about reskilling, it's about upskilling, it's about new skills. And they look at the green side to things. So as I said, green skill, but also transition to, sorry about that, transition to a fair and inclusive and collaborative economy. So that's quite important. So there are actions. The action is about setting up those skills, being a skill hubs, being a skill academy, and they want to make sure that the key stakeholder in the world of education and training are investing in the right places, and to support that, they are looking at a leadership group. So those are SDS priorities and commitments in terms of skills need to deliver net zero. The next slide then is, sorry, one too many. Here we go. So looking at the skills themselves, and they've identified the need we will need is, regardless of the industry, regardless of the sector, there will be a need for underpinning skills. And what those underpinning skills are is about the circular economy, adapting to the circular economy. The other one is about the meta skills. That's the skills that everybody needs to deliver on all the topics we talked about. And that's about self-management. That's about social intelligence. Innovation comes here again. We talked about it. And if we looked at manufacturing specifically, rather than looking at the other sectors, then you can find there is a lot of skills required. They reckon it on the managerial side, but also on the digital data side, that's going to be needed. On the quality side, that's going to be also needed. And circularity, sustainability, all those topics are going to need to be brought in, legislation, regulations. We'll talk about that later on. And the need for skills and MIS is coming on its own here in terms of bringing those skills to the front, to bring those skills as a place to get those skills. So looking at the why, so we look at the what, which are the real scale, and the why because we want a recovery, but we don't just want a recovery, we want that recovery to be a green recovery, and that's why it's driving that. So what do we need to deliver a green recovery skill-wise? Then you need skills to support efficiency, and what you can see there is efficiency in terms of regulations, efficiency in terms of new technologies, the efficiency in terms of your system, your process, and there is also more and more, I would say, direction which is about environment accounting. So it's about not only providing financial report, but providing environmental report. And what you're going to need to get there is you're going to need support from your operators, and you're going to see that coming again and again. The operator side, which are your employees and yourself and the company, and they are becoming more and more a cornerstone of the delivery of a green economy, a green recovery. You need skills also for low carbon, because that's what we want to do, and that look into renewable energy, for example, so offshore floating, for example, or you're going to be looking at the building side of things, which is about installing retrofitting and maintaining the servicing is going to be a big piece of it, of those new technologies. But again, to do that, you're going to need your operator to have the skills to deliver that and to minimize carbon emission. You're going to need skill in climate resilience, and that's about being able to deal with it. And that's about setting up your company, setting up your business to deal with climate change. Because the key things on the climate change, we're not looking at zero impact. We're looking at trying to minimize the impact to 1.5 degrees, at least no more than 2 degrees, but ideally 1.5 degrees. So there will be an impact that we talked about last week. So how do you build climate resilience? And that's about risk management. Again, that's about new technologies. But again, as you can see, you're going to need your operator again to be in here. And for your natural asset, we talked about it, peatland, woodland. Then again, it's about accounting, it's about your impact. And again, you've got legislation. The government is not going to be shy from legislation regulating if they don't see what they are looking for, if they don't see the progress they want to see. So if I was going to take away from those two slides, is the key role of the operators, the key need for innovations across the board, and how new regulation, new legislation, environmental accounting is coming forward. And conditionality is something we're going to see more and more, and I'll come back to conditionality. So that's the why that's a green recovery. Not only we want a recovery after COVID, but we want recovery to be green. We want to have a purpose, to be positive. And then who? The employee. And why the employee? Because they are keen. They are keen because they believe that getting new skills will enhance their employability. They are keen because they are worried about computer or robots taking their job, and they're ready to learn. 74% are ready to learn on new skills. Mainly it's about improving, enhancing their employability. But what's more interesting, I think, for us is 75% recognize that it is their own responsibility to do so. It isn't their employer responsibility to upgrade their skills. So not only are they keen, but they understand that they've got a key role to play in it, and they've got to buy into it themselves in order to get there. So that's what I think is quite important. Is so who is your employee and their keenness to learn and get there on their own if needs be. So if I look at what are the, if you want, the factors influencing all this, and the skills that your employee are going to be looking at. So the generic skills, so you've got product life cycle, procurement. Again, you've got your accounting, which is going to be required regardless of the sector you're looking into. You're looking at scientific and technical skills, which again are irrelevant, or the sector, the chapter you're looking for. So all those are going to be needed. We talked about procurement, we talked about impact. So procurement is upstream and downstreams, and the influence of your customer in that process and your suppliers in that process. We've talked about electricity, energy, and we're looking at marine energy, we're looking at wind energy, offshore energy, all those sectors that are going to need new skills because of new technology. In terms of building and constructions, then it's all around legislation, planning, having the right. So planning is a house, buildings, companies, anything that's got the right to build, obviously, and making sure that they are, how should I say, not only you're allowed to build if you want, but they are sustainable building that minimize consumptions, and that's what you see in the incentives. That's what you see. Again, you see here renewable. You can see supply chain. Supply chain is a key role in here. So that's the building sectors. And then you've got the transport, and the transport is looking at every area, being rail, being car, being active travels, every vehicles, and what skills are you going to need here? The skills regarding the infrastructure with electrification where possible, especially looking at rail. And for that, I would recommend you join the rail cluster if you've got an interest in that area. And it's becoming bigger and bigger, and it will not all be electrification, so there's more opportunities, and there is opportunity in freights, opportunity in vehicles, and you can see in vehicles in the automotive industry there is obviously a special set of skills that's going to come with those new systems, and that could be the infrastructure like the distribution of fuels as well as the vehicle themselves. So transport is a big one because the transport is a big emitters of greenhouse gases. So other areas you can think about is you looked at it as the industry, and in industry you've got area in chemicals and pharmaceutical, oil and gas. So you've got Aberdeen area, you've got Grangemouth area. Big emitters, big oil and gas skills in those areas that needs to be upskilled and reskilled. You go about biofuel would be one of them, and so example in the food and drink would, for example, would be Horizon Protein, who is transforming byproduct from the whiskey industry into quality nutrient for feed industry. So that's the byproduct of the food and drink industry. You've got waste and water. We talked about it. Again, we looked at the opportunity last week, but it's about minimizing waste across the board, including food waste, including company waste, like energy waste, and it's about waste management skills. And in here, you could think about like Livenseed, the company that is making construction material out of waste from the waste management stream. So ash, basically. And then the last one is land management. And land management could have to do with, carbon capture. So it could be equipment you will be providing, and it could be business management, agronomy and soil, but it doesn't stop there. And in here you could think about, it's called Oceanium, for example, who is looking at developing product from seaweed. So it goes further than just soil, it includes the sea. So how do you manage land? How do you stop growing on land and growing in the sea? So those are some of the skills. And then you go biomass and biofuel. So in this area, a lot of it is going to be about biomass production from land use. But you need also biofuel is going to be new. It's a new technology that needs to be applied across a range of industries. And last but not least, you've got all the negative side of things. So not only do we want to minimize emission, but we recognize that zero emission altogether is not going to be an option. So we need to capture, store, and we need to take out of the air those emissions. And that's what we're talking about here, the carbon capture and storage, those nets, negative emission technology, or carbon capture, anaerobic digestion. Those are, again, new areas that are going to need new innovations. So across those slides, what's the takeaway? You've got recurring themes, which is legislation and regulation are going to come in. And the government is not going to be shy about creating legislations if it doesn't see the progress it wants to see. You've got accounting and reporting coming in, and that's about reporting on your net zero progress and accounting for your environmental impact. Innovations is going to be key. Innovation in new technology, new product, new processes. And finally, you're going to have supply chain and life cycle. It's going to be another big one. And as your upstream, your downstream, and your product life cycle after manufacturing. But last but not least, the operators are going to be key. So you need to make sure you take your employees on board with you, and you need to make sure you take your customer with you. So it will be about communications. It will be about getting the buy-in. So we talked about the what, the why, the who. Now the when. When do you need those skills? And one of the things you may do it formally, or it may be in your head, but it's about the competency of your workforce, and where are your skills, and when are you going to need them, and what do you want to do? It goes back to that innovation I mentioned earlier on. You need the 4 pillars, and one of those pillars is the business. So what you're going to want to look at what skills you need. So the skills required to deliver your business goals, that's what we talked about, what you want to do. So that's what you want to look at, the what. And then the reason you want to do it, the reason you need those skills. So to deliver, once you've identified what you want to do, you want to find out, so you want to diversify, you want to tap into specific opportunities. So that gives you, pardon me, that gives you the why. And then you're going to look at the when. So by that is about the durations of those skills. So is it a service you're going to provide, and then you need those skills in-house permanently? Or is it something you just need to develop? So you need those skills temporarily, and then develop it, and then train the minimum you need to train, and then get on with it. So that's the when. And you're going to need the who with this employee, but you need to find out, is the employee interested? Because employee will always be keen to get new skills, but they need to be interested in those new skills to deliver value from it. Otherwise, they're just going to get skills, they're going to get wasted because they're not going to get used. And the next thing so you know what you want to do, you know the skills you need to do it, you know when you're going to need those skills and who you need to have the skills for. But then the next question is where you're going to get those skills and how you're going to bring those skills in. And finally, what is it going to cost to bring those skills in? And what is the ROI? That's it, the how much, if you want. So I've put up a quick table that just shows that as an example. You've got the skill required, when you need them, how long you need them for, why you need them, and the skill level you want, and the interest from people and the actions you're going to take. So one of the key things here, I think, is you need your employees. And we talked about it last week. Employees are keen on net zero because they want to have an impact on the environment, a positive impact on the environment. And they want their job to have an environmental side to it. So that's a win. And then the how. So there are 3 things: is on the job, social, and formal. And what you're going to look at is back in the 80s, in a how, it was where you had a model which is called the 70-20-10 models. And 70% was on the job, just learning as you go. 20% was interaction with others, and in those days, interaction with others was really your peer, your community was really your work environment, your colleagues, and 10% was about classroom or environment or formal educations. The reality of it is in the 2020s is look more like 55, 25, and 20 for employees. And as a slide before mentioned, it's even more towards the formal for executive. But that shows that there is actually a lot more training, a lot more value in getting formal skill, formal education. The other piece also is social now, is more than just your peers, it's more than just your work, as social media. So people will interact with other people around the world to share information and ideas and how to progress and learn about the skills. So really, that 70-20-10 model as becoming a 55-25-20 models. So that's really how you can get the skills. It's on the job, social or formal. And you probably want to think about 55-25-20 models, and you want to also keep into consideration two things: that your employee are keen on getting training and skills in the world of net zero, and they are keen in upskilling, retraining, getting better employability. So where are you going to get those skills now? So one option is academia, which is the first part, of course. And an example of that would be knowledge transfer partnership. And what that provides is an opportunity to have on the job, because what you get is you get a graduate that tends to be located at the company. So it's on the job training, but it's also a collaboration with academics. So you also get access to the brain power of the supervisor. So you don't only get the information or the pair of hands from the graduates, you also get the brain power from the supervisor, and you get access to university facilities. So that's on the job with academia. You've got the other option is social, again with academia, and it could be universities or colleges, and it's about building your network. So, for example, University of Glasgow has got a network of lecturers, professors, academics that work in the field of net zero. And if you look more in the Northeast, then you've got the Oil and Gas Technology Center. It's got an academic panel also that can be tapped into. If universities is not your things, but you rather look at colleges, you've got energy skills partnerships that provide that sort of support. So in here, it's about you building your social network and tapping into those academics' knowledge and see how you can build upon that. So it's not about bringing a graduate in. It's not about on the job. It's about the social side of things. And then there is a more formal, and for more formal, we point towards the NMIS. And the other one that are in charge of developing that manufacturing skills academy. And they offer free support, as you can see from individual, but they also offer all the way to doctorate, so to formal training, to going back to university, going back to classroom, going back to the colleges. So and they also offer the on-the-job. You can see the foundation apprenticeship. In digital is something we talked about. So one way to do it, as I said, is the academia. And the academia, you can do it on the job, you can do it social, you can do it formal. The other area you will be interested in bringing those skills, because it's about bringing skills and embed skills in a business, is to do it in-house. And in-house is more about upskilling and reskilling. But the first option you've got on the job is the apprenticeship. And there is a range of apprenticeship available, being modern apprenticeship, being technical, being professional, with different level of apprenticeship and different outcome. But that is an on the job. As we know, apprenticeship is on the job, and the government is looking at funding those eco apprenticeships. So bringing in especially circularity as a key piece to it. So, and there are apprenticeships that have been created for low carbon sectors, or apprenticeships that have got a low carbon dimension to them. So that's one way to get it on the job. That's bringing an apprenticeship, and here again, SDS can support that. If you are looking for graduates, then again, NMIS is planning or is putting in place help for STEM graduates. And through the manufacturing skills, through the Transition Training Fund, which we will come to, and to do that again is on the job, but it's a graduate level, which is a good thing, and they want to interact with small and medium size businesses, so SMEs, and they want to focus on in-demand skills and especially digital and net zero. So that's another area, and they've got a scheme coming up, and I think it's about 30 graduates they are looking at taking in. And then you've got training courses, and those training courses are free. So are they the one you're looking for? That's what we need to figure out, and it goes back to the when I mentioned it earlier on, which is doing that competency table, the competency matrix. But there are skills out there, and you could get them for free. For example, universities, you can get the Open University, colleges, the ASP, Energy Skills Partnerships. You can look at institute. We talked about NMIS or Energy Institute, and there are resources. But what I wanted to emphasize here is what I talked about earlier on, is 74% of employees believe it's their own responsibility to get there. So you can provide the resource, and you can ask your employee to come back to you with a rationale about why they want to do it. So you need to define your strategy, probably, and it goes back to that innovation piece, the business strategy. And then ask your employee, how are you going to be able to play in there? And are you keen, are you interested to play in there? So that's if you want, the way to get formal training in-house. And then funding. So the how much of all this. So once you find out, what you want to do, the reason why you want to do it, and you've identified who you want to train and train in what skills and how you want to go about it on the job, social and informal, then the question can become, how am I going to fund all this? How am I going to get an ROI? So one option to fund is the Green Job Funds. And that's managed by Scottish Engineering. And the way to get there is to create green jobs or transforming non-green jobs into green jobs. The other concept in here is to minimize the impact on the environment. So you can see here conditionality starting to creep in. But that's one of them, the Green Job Funds. Another way of funding is your knowledge transfer partnership I talked about, which is a KTN managed by Innovate UK. And here it's about putting together academia, businesses, graduates, and embedded the technology or the knowledge into the company. So that's another way of funding. The APSRC or Innovate UK funding is, again, a relationship with academia, but in this case, most of the time it's specific to a project. It's really research oriented. It could be blue sky research, and it's likely to be a graduate at the university. So, but there is again resources, and again there is access. You need to look at the whole value, and there is more than just a graduate. There's access to supervisor technology. There's access to facilities at the universities. You've got another fund, which is the Flexible Wealth Development Fund from the Scottish Funding Council, and that's about accessing funding to create training programs which are specific to your needs. So again, it's about looking at your skills, what do you need to play in there, and how do you get access to those funds. Another one is a National Transition Training Fund. And the National Transition Training Fund is about offering opportunities, so again, developing skills so people are employable in a new world. But there is a lot of options, and that's the one that's been funding NMIS, the 30 graduates, STEM graduate I mentioned about. That's where the funding comes from. And you've got more specific fund, like the Digital Catalyst Fund, and that one is looking at digital skills. And there is a recognition that net zero is going to need a lot of digital skills, Internet of Things, big data management. and how you can control things remotely, how you can measure things remotely, that sort of thing. So digital is a big piece of it. And then we talked about apprenticeships, and you've got apprenticeship employer grants, which is about bringing an apprentice in-house and supporting that. So it's on the job, apprentices training, and then, as I said, you've got a range of apprenticeships available. And finally, what you've got is access to adult learners. So that's reskilling, upskilling education for adults. And here you've got the Scottish Wider Access Programme, and that's supporting these to support the course, but that would be more driven by the employee themselves rather than driven by the employer. So what's to take out from all this is there is a lot of funding out there. The government is prepared to help, but you need to show that what you're going to do or what you want to change has an impact that goes in the right directions towards net zero. And that's the support on all the skills and examples of support that to bring skills and embed skills in the company. So I would suggest we now take a quick break, 5 minutes. So shall we reconvene? What time, Paul, will you say?
9:20. Or
9:20?
Yep, we'll see everyone then.
Okay, so I would suggest then we just take a break before we go on to part 4 and 9:20.
Perfect.
Okay, speak to you all soon. Right now, so it's back, I think, 21 past 9. Yeah. So thanks for rejoining, and thanks for being part of it. I think one other thing I wanted team to take, or the group to take out of the part 3, is funding wise, there are a lot of opportunities out there. Some of the ones I've presented may have lapsed. Some of them are still to be defined and quantified. But the key point here is, if you can keep at the top of it, there is loads of opportunities to get support in upscaling and reskilling towards net zero. And once you've identified your opportunities, where you want to play, what you want to do, then there are opportunities to take the workforce and your employees with you. They are keen, and there is funding support. So I'll move on to part 4, which is looking at the resources, and specifically, I'm going to be looking at the policy. I'll share, or you'll find the presentation when it's posted. There is websites and publications, and I've put a slide on acronyms, because a lot of those reports seem to love their acronyms. But the focus here is going to be on policy. Why do you need a policy? One of the key reasons is conditionality. And the advisors to the Scottish Government, or like a key advisor like Mariana Mazzucato, will recommend that every support is linked to conditionality. It means that you only get support if you've got a policy, and that policy is in line with net zero ambitions. You also need a policy for procurement reason. And I've mentioned that how your consumer, your customer, is looking at that information. And then for supply chain reason is to make sure that your supplier also understands what you're trying to do, as well as your customer. So upstream, downstreams. But there's a good reason to have a policy. And that policy needs to be smart. And by that, I mean it needs to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and last but not least, time-bound. Time is key here, because you are trying to get very quickly. And it needs to be, as Chris Starks mentioned, it needs to be a green policy, time-bound. And the thing here is also not to reinvent the wheel. And how can you leverage standards, maybe like 14001, or all the process you already have in place, so you can use that to deliver your net zero ambition, to deliver your policy, to measure the effectiveness of your policy, to make that policy smart. So that's a key piece of it. How do you leverage what you already have rather than doing something new? So for an SME, whether that starts with reducing your own emission, but that's something you're probably doing already, net zero or no net zero. And the reason for that is your emission is directly related to your consumptions, and your consumption and waste is directly related to your cost. So that's an area, and that's an area where you want to prioritize scope 1 and scope 2. The next bit is really your value chain emission, and that's really focused on scope 2 itself, which is about the emission of your energy providers and how you address that. And the idea here is, can you move away from gas to electricity, and can you get your electricity from renewable resources? That's basically the basis of scope 2. But the next pillar, you need to think about emission of scope 3, which is the most difficult to put together. And in scope 3, that's where you're looking at your upstream and downstreams. So that would be your third pillar when you put a strategy together. And then the last but not least is about influencing society. And by that, it could be your employee, it could be how they commute. So using public transport, using active travel, sharing cars, anything that's more how you can impact on your employee, your local community, how can you help. So you need to think about, micro energy generations, community energy generation, that sort of thing. That's changing. That's pillar 4. But you want to really focus originally your policy on scope 1 and scope 2. Now, what can you leverage to get there? You can leverage what you probably already do, which is your PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act. That's your 9001, your 14001. Those standards are based upon the Plan, Do, Check, Act process. So you go there. But you can also use lean thinking, which you're probably looking at already. And they make a model, which is define, measure, analyze, improve, and control, because you can use that to define your policy. So what is it you want to do? And then you create a measurable system. So how do you measure it? And what's the time bound? And then you can analyze the progress you made against that commitment. So you can analyze. Once you can measure it, if you can measure it, you can analyze it. If you can analyze it, you can manage it. And if you can manage it, you can improve it. And that's the other piece of the DMAIC. And finally, you need to control those progress. So not only you need to go on and show your roadmaps and when you are ticking the boxes, but you need to make sure that when you focus on the next topic, you're not dropping the topic you've just leveraged. So all those are likely to be already embedded in the organization, mainly for quality purposes, mainly for control, environmental, 14,000, 9,000. Lean thinking is another area you're probably bringing into your company. So how can you use those processes and concepts and leverage those processes to deliver your net zero? The other bit is leveraging your certification, your standards, what you're being audited against. And a good one for managing is 14,001. But you could look at other standards like 1464 for measuring and verifying, and you can look at other standards for communicating your progress and the work you're doing is going to be key to communicating to your customer, communicating to your employee, communicating to your community. So that will be quite key. And why you're using standards? Well, that's the way most organizations have found a way to deliver on those guidelines and reducing carbon emission. 93% of companies are using some sort of standards, guidance, or specifications. And we talked about 14,001, which is an obvious one, but it's not the only one. And last week there was a mention of 50,001, and again 50,000 is a good one because it's looking at reducing or managing energy consumptions. And you can imagine if you manage it, you reduce it and improve it. And if you do improve on your consumption, you're going to improve on your emissions. And you could look at specifications like 2050, 2060. So there are opportunities to look at what you've already got in-house. Don't reinvent the wheel. Use what you've already got in-house to deliver what you're trying to do. But you need to have a smart policy. You need a policy and you need a smart policy. So in here, I'm showing you examples of how you put a policy together. And there are a lot of opportunities out there. You've got the climate pledge, you've got the SME climate hub, and if it's for an SME commitment, it doesn't have to be big. But in here, you can see, for example, it's half your greenhouse gas emission before 2030. So a specific is looking at greenhouse gas emissions. It's time bound, it's 2030. Is halving achievable? You would think it is, but that's what you want to look at. And then achieve net zero by 2050. So that's a UK target, no Scotland target. Scotland is looking at 2045. So you can see that, and not last but not least, you need to disclose. That's the reporting on the yearly basis in this case. So it could be a very simple process, but those are examples to get you started on the sort of policy you want to do. So you've got also, science-based targets, which is quite important. That's usually driven by corporations rather than SMEs. And you've got BLAB. And then another opportunity you could look at is the climate perks, for example. And what that is about providing employees with climate perks. And that means that by being green in their behavior, then they get perks. And in this case, it's about the suggestion of traveling by train rather than traveling by plane. Because planes are a big source of emission, but traveling by train takes a lot longer. So how do you square that circle? So there are opportunities here on how to start that policy. But the key things here to take away is you need a smart policy, and it needs to be measurable, and it needs to be time bound. And that's what you want to do. So once you've identified your commitments, then the question is, how are you going to measure that commitment? How are you going to measure the progress toward that commitment? And how are you going to make sure you arrive at the right time in the right place? So that's what I is. So that get you started on a policy. So as mentioned earlier on, here's a list of websites you may be interested in having a look at. Where there is more available and something we could look at on a more specific basis, especially for during the one-to-ones, which we are planning to do. There is also a list of publications could be looked into, which again, could be shared and could be discussed and looked in more details. But that would be part of the presentation, which will be shared. And I've put a list of acronyms, if you are wondering what the acronym means. And so that's another area of potential interest. Finally, what is a program made of? So the webinars, and we had part 1 and 2 last week. This week we did part 3 and 4, and we are planning to do further webinars, and Paul will come back to that. But there is also an opportunity for one-to-one, as I mentioned, and I would say, make a note of interest to Scottish engineering. But the idea is about how can we support you specifically on a one-to-one and signpost you in the right directions. So the takeaway is why now? So climate change is not new. COVID opportunities have been created. People expectations have been reset. So when that is not new, it's coming now at the forefront. But what now? It's creating opportunities rather than looking at it as red tape. Let's look at it opportunities, and there will be incentive linked to government expectations and areas of focus, and that's how you tap into those opportunities. And to get there, you're going to need people. You're going to need operators, and those people are going to need skills. And where do you get those skills? And they will require innovations. So there won't be any way around it. So from that, I think I'll pass on to Paul.
Well, you're still in the hot seat for a little while because we've got a couple of questions to come up.
Right.
So, first, I'm going to ask Ailsa. I asked a question in chat. Ailsa, if you're willing to come off mute, can you come off mute and ask a question?
Yeah, sure. I was just wondering on some of the earlier part where it was on about regulations and legislations, and Eric was saying, they're not going to miss and hit the wall with any of that. But then it came down to accounting and reporting. So what I'm wondering is, what's the balance? Because you might have some people, some companies that say, you know what, we're just going to pay for it and not actually change anything for the better. So the reporting of progress might show very little progress, but then you might get other companies who are kind of wanting to do morally the right thing. And I'm just wondering if it's like a 50-50 split, or if there are any other repercussions if you're only focusing on just essentially paying the fine.
Yeah, so I think that there is a recognition that emission trading scheme cannot be the answer. So it can't be just a case of, well, I'll plant more tree to become net zero. And that's where I think in their reporting, the government and their taxonomy are planning to do something along those lines. They don't know yet. They're still taking advice on taxonomy. And in terms of policy, then it's been seen as a better process not to use energy trading scheme, and they come at a cost. So for SME especially, then the easiest route or the cheapest route is probably to try to reduce emission rather than buying energy trading scheme. But if you think about the B Corp, you think about all those things, that they want to make sure that you're not using energy trading schemes as a mean to reach net zero. So interestingly enough, you've got a big company like BrewDog, beer company that basically bought land and is now a carbon negative company on the basis that they are restoring peatland and they are planting trees and that sort of thing. But that's not what the world is looking for. So it's not about using energy trading scheme as a mean to reduce it. Does that answer your question?
Kind of, because I kind of get what BrewDog are doing, and they're trying to essentially make the place better and reducing their impact that way. But I still feel that there are going to be a lot of people who are just saying, you know what, we'll pay it. Yeah, and they're still using as much electricity, as much energy. They're still doing as much damage. So
they argue that, you know, in their case, and I'm not defending them, but in their case, they would argue that, you know, then they're getting their resources or their energy from renewable resources. So they are looking at the whole package. But what I think in terms of legislation, regulation, reporting, I think you will see in that conditionality, in that reporting, a need to minimize the use of energy trading scheme and to maximize the reduction of emission.
Okay.
Is that okay, Ilsa?
Yep, cool. Cheers, Paul.
Great stuff. For our next question, we'll swing from Western Bartonshire over to Forfar. So Ian Bodman asked a question this morning. Ian, if you wanted to come off mute, you'll be welcome.
Yeah, no problem, Paul. Basically, we're looking at upgrading our extraction system on our hot dip galvanising plant. I just wondered if there was any funding out there available to help recover some of the cost.
The cost for
replacing an extraction system, which I guess would be an efficiency improvement.
Yeah, so I haven't looked in that area specifically because I've been focusing on skills, but while doing that, I can find a lot of funds out there. As I said, there is a lot of support. It's actually mind-blowing. People are queuing to support it. It's the ability to find the right place. So that would be the perfect one for one-to-one.
Yeah, and there's one that springs to mind, Ian, for that, which is it's not grant funding, but it's pretty useful. It's one of the Zero Waste Scotland programmes where they do an energy audit first and then give you a series of recommendations. But if it's still open, the payback period. So first of all, it's zero interest, and the payback period is matched to the ROI of the improvements. So I know several members have done that in their plans, and in fact we actually did the offices at Scottish Engineering under it last year. So we'll have a look into those and see what's still available, and we'll come back to you on a one-to-one for that.
Yeah, that's perfect, Paul. Thanks very much.
Great stuff. The other question I see is from, I think it's Malcolm is it Malcolm McKnight? Malcolm, do you want to ask a question? Thanks.
Yeah, sure, guys. In the post-COVID world, as more people tend to work from home, if that's going to be the new norm, your business energy use is going to reduce because you're not on site. So how do organisations account for domestic business use? Or so people are going to be computers, they're going to use their heating, their lighting, so they're at home at a domestic rate. How does an organisation account for that? Because isn't that their employees using energy, therefore that carbon footprint belongs to the organisation, or does it?
So there is a bit of leeway into the science-based targets. I think it's about 5%. So that may fall into that. That's a piece where you may just take the benefit without mentioning or without accounting for the cost. So in that sense, it's a benefit to the business, but it's a cost to the I would say the individual, the employee, because they are working from home. Yeah. But that's the only thing I could think about. I would say, first of all, is to start on that road, you want to focus on scope 1 and 2. And then to your point, then you need to start thinking about scope 3, and I would fall into scope 3. But you're correct. I think the people are working from home more and more, and people through COVID have found out that it works, and they may want to keep going with that. But it goes back to that commuting. Not only you gain by consumptions, but you gain by not commuting. So that's just. So
you could argue there's a balance there, so that what we save on commuting, we're losing on domestic rates. So I think it's almost a balance there. It depends on the community. The other option would be a policy where you use green energy sources as a company. That is, but then I think there may be additional domestic rate costs that you would have a certain unit cost increase.
Yeah, I think one of the gain you can account for is no commuting and no transport with car. Car is always the biggest emitters.
Yep. The other question I had is, in vehicles in a COVID environment where you're not supposed to car share, then you've got a change there. Now, we're not going to be in COVID forever, one hopes. So it's minor detail on that point. Car sharing is preferred, but sometimes not possible, and neither is using public transport in a COVID environment. Yeah.
I think the drive here is not for car sharing, but more for public transport usage. But you're correct; it's just in the COVID environment, it's the same challenge.
So I don't anticipate that COVID challenge will be here forever. I think we all hope that, and crystal ball time is who knows. But you got to assume it's not.
That is certainly our hope, Malcolm. Thanks for the questions. I've got a question for you from John Donald. John, do you want to come off mute to ask that? If not possible,
yes. Great. Can you hear me? Our office is potentially very, very green in as much as it's powered from a solar panel array and it's heated by a biomass boiler. Now, my question is biomass boiler still considered to be green? Because one minute it seems to be the way to go, the next minute it seems to be not in favour. So is burning wood chip still regarded as being eco-friendly?
So I think in terms of what is and isn't eco-friendly, so is that more eco-friendly than using gas? Yes. Could they be even more eco-friendly, or is it the wood chip generation? That's the scope 3 again that becomes quite convoluted. But how are those wood chips created? So, and then how do you capture the emission of your boiler? biomass boiler. So it's about bioenergy. It's about the generation of biomass, and it's about what you do with the emissions. So I would say, yeah, it's the right direction. I would personally encourage it. Is it achievable? That's another. It goes back to that SMART target. But is it the ultimate? Is it the best you can do? Then I'm afraid I can't comment on that. But there are, like if you think about the carbon trust, for example, there is support again out there to review that. There is support to help you and understand, is it and how to go there.
Okay,
Cheers.
John, thanks for the question. So I think at that, there are no other questions in the chat, so can you bear with us for literally just a couple more minutes? We would like to swap over, and we're going to get some direction for you for the future kind of sessions that we put into the programme. Let me just... so I'm going to stop sharing here. And we share. Hopefully this is the right one. Okay, so what we're asking you to do here is if you can go to a phone or open a browser window in the device you're on today and go to menti.com and enter that code there. So 56598221, and you should find yourself coming to this first question. So the first question we're asking you is, we're looking at the priority for our next year of webinars, and we're asking you to look at these. Which do you think is the most important for you? So the three options there, and you can only choose one, is focus on the detail of the relevant chapters, and you can read those yourself. Some direction on signposting to relevant bodies to support introduction of skills, the development of a net zero roadmap, or examples of innovation in Scotland and further afield that have leveraged the skills and opportunities offered by each chapter. So if you can find your way to that and give us your opinion, we'd really appreciate it. So I'll just leave it for a minute. We've got 16 answers so far. We've still got, I think, about 52 people on. So I'm going to give it another half a minute or so to get some more examples or more feedback. Okay, that's us at 36 and it's slowing down, so that's really useful. Thanks a lot. I'm gonna, oh, there's one more sneaking in. Anybody who's struggling to get there and wants me to hold on before going to the next question, just come off mute and say stop. Okay, I want to move on to the next question. So the next question is if we were including content where the focus was on the 8 chapters, which of these would be your priority? Now, in this one, you can choose up to 3 of the 8. So you've got three options to choose, and between electricity, buildings, transport, industry, waste and the circular economy, land use change and forestry, agriculture, and negative emissions technology. Ian Bodman, I'm expecting to see a vote for agriculture from you. Great stuff. That says 39, which is about the, oh no, of course, that's, got to remember everybody's got 3 answers, so we'll give it for another minute or so yet. Any more? Okay, we'll slow down there. So let's go to the last question. And that is, so if our focus was to be on signposting to useful resources, which area would be most beneficial to have guidance on? And so the 3 options here are skills, what the skills are, where to get them, how to embed them in the organisation, what funding, opportunities, the current projects, their stakeholders, projects ambition and the opportunity for innovation, or a roadmap on how to make a smart commitment, publicise it and then track its progress. Quite even, this one. Okay. Okay, I think we've slowed down at that. Thanks all for that. Really useful to us, and we will take that and use it in our planning for what we do next. Let's see. Switch that back on. So I think that's us for today. I don't see any more questions have come up in chat, and that's us. So let me say my thanks to Eric for the presentation today. Again, any feedback anyone's got is really welcome. Help us shape what we do next and make sure that we're putting things into the content of this programme that actually meet what you need. A reminder of our offer that we'd be more than glad to set a one-to-one with you to work further and see what we can do to support. And look out for more updates from us in terms of what the next events will be and any other information and resources that we put on our website. Eric, before I close for the day, anything else that we meant to mention that we should mention?
No, I can think of. I think to your point, it's about one-to-ones and the next webinars.
Good stuff. Tony, you look like you may have a question that you'd like to ask.
Yeah, Paul, I've 4 times tried to put something onto the chat column, but it just doesn't seem to be coming through at all. Can we have the presentation slides as a completely separate entity so we can reuse them in the organisation, please, rather than having the whole presentation, just the slides?
Right. Okay. I think we could put a PDF up on the website. We'll do that and share it to folks. And I suppose, and I know, Sarah, if we could also post the slides from the first event as well as a PDF, that's probably, no point in doing one without doing the other.
Yeah,
that's great.
Great. Thanks.
Mate. Okay. Well, I think that's us for today. We're only giving you 5 minutes back of your day this week. So thanks again for joining. Hope this has been useful. And as I said, any feedback we would love to hear, please get in touch. And with that, have a good rest of your day.